First of all, always remember that Genesis 4:17 does not say that Cain married his sister. However, some Christians claim that Cain married his sister, and there is a reason why some Christians claim that Cain married his sister. If Adam was the first man to live on planet Earth, then Cain could only obtain a wife through incest. And many Christians actually believe that Adam was the first man to live on planet Earth. Therefore, some Christians claim that in Genesis 4:17, Cain married and had sex with one of his little sisters. As you will see, some Christians have committed multiple heresies. One heresy leads to another heresy. One lie leads to another lie. Basically, a Christian believes in the lie that Adam was the first man on planet Earth, and then that Christian encounters Bible verses in Genesis chapter 4 and Genesis chapter 5 that help to prove that Adam was not the first man. So, that Christian reads certain verses in Genesis chapter 4 and Genesis chapter 5, and then that Christian thinks that he needs to provide some damage control. That Christian gives in to the temptation to contradict certain verses in Genesis chapter 4 and Genesis chapter 5, and he does so in order to defend and perpetuate the doctrine that Adam was the first man on planet Earth. As you will see, that Christian paints himself into a corner, and consequently, that Christian ends up claiming that God commanded men to have sex with their sisters. Look what young earth / no pre-Adamite doctrine has done to the Holy Bible. Incidentally, if you do believe that the Holy Bible actually claims that Adam was the first man on planet Earth, then you should watch my video, Evolution is in the Bible, and listen to the discussion of 1 Corinthians 15:45 and 1 Corinthians 15:47. Also, watch my video, Pre-Adamites in the Bible, Part 1. To make a long story short, there is not a single verse in the Holy Bible that indicates that Adam was the first man on planet Earth. Undoubtedly, you have heard the false doctrine that Adam was the first man. And always remember, Satan is a liar. Satan lied to Eve in Genesis 3:4-5, and Eve fell for it. And look what happened to her. Now, you don't fall for the lie that Adam was the first man. All of this can be resolved by carefully studying multiple Bible verses. First of all, simply be aware that Cain was a pure Adamite who married a woman who descended from the people whom God created in Genesis 1:27. God created Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 2, hundreds of thousands of years after God created the earliest pre-Adamites. Cain had 100% Adamite blood, and his wife had 100% pre-Adamite blood. Therefore, Cain's son, Enoch, had 50% Adamite blood and 50% pre-Adamite blood. Enoch married a woman who descended from the people whom God created in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. Therefore, Enoch's son, Irad, had 25% Adamite blood and 75% pre-Adamite blood. You get the idea. Adamite blood became more and more diluted with pre-Adamite blood with each successive generation. And incidentally, although Adamite blood technically became more and more diluted with pre-Adamite blood with each successive generation, God did not think of that Adamite blood as diluted in the way that we think of it as having been technically diluted. Okay, all of that having been said, let's closely examine certain verses in Genesis chapter 4 and Genesis chapter 5. After we do so, you will see that the doctrine that Adam was the first man is a false doctrine. First of all, you should understand that the doctrine that in Genesis 4:17 Cain married and had sex with one of his younger sisters is a false doctrine that actually depends on the false doctrine that Seth, Adam's third son, had an older sister. As we will see, the Holy Bible reveals that all of Seth's sisters were younger than Seth. One verse that you really need to understand is Genesis 4:25. Genesis 4:25 reveals that Seth was the first child whom Eve had after Eve had Abel back in Genesis 4:2. In other words, Seth was the third child of Adam and Eve. Adam was 130 years old when Eve had Seth. See Genesis 5:3. And as we will see, the fact that Seth's oldest sister was his younger sister is a fact that shows that Cain did not marry a sister back in Genesis 4:17. In other words, when Cain married a woman back in Genesis 4:17, Cain did not yet have any sisters. And that fact proves that Cain's wife was not an Adamite. Cain's wife descended from pre-Adamites. And now you can see that you don't need to tell anybody that God commanded men to have sex with their sisters. Genesis 1:28 does reveal that God commanded mankind to multiply. Therefore, if Adam and Eve were referenced in Genesis 1:27, then that would mean that God commanded the children of Adam and Eve to have incest with each other. However, Adam and Eve were not referenced in Genesis 1:27. God created pre-Adamites in Genesis 1:27, and God created Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 2. However, for instructional purposes, let us suppose that there were no pre-Adamites, and let us suppose that Cain did have a sister who was born approximately 100 years before Seth was born. First of all, be aware that doctrine is heresy against Genesis 4:25 and Genesis 5:4. Both of those verses prove that Seth was the third child of Adam and Eve. But for instructional purposes, we will pretend that Cain did have a sister who was born approximately 100 years before Seth was born. When we do so, we will see that Genesis 4:25 proves that Cain did not have a sister who was born approximately 100 years before Seth was born. Actually, all we need to do is read Genesis 4:25 in order to see that Seth was the third child of Adam and Eve. First of all, let's read Genesis 4:25. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth. For God, she said, hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. When Eve said, for God hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, Eve actually indicated that Seth was the first child whom she had after she had Abel. Eve indicated that Seth was her third child. However, some Christians have the desire for Cain to have had a sister who was older than Seth. Those Christians need for that to be true because those Christians need to perpetuate the doctrine that Adam was the first man. Simply put, if Christians cannot dream up this hypothetical older sister of Seth's, then we will have proof that Cain married a woman whom descended from the people whom God created in Genesis 1:27. And that would prove that Adam was not the first man. But some Christians have this strange need for Adam to have been the first man. And those Christians consequently need for Cain to have had incest with a sister who was allegedly older than Seth. But Seth did not have an older sister. However, let us suppose that Seth did have an older sister. Suppose that from Genesis 4:1, when Eve had Cain, to Genesis 4:25, when Eve had Seth, Eve had the following children in the following order: Cain, Abel, Bob, Christina, David, Edward, Frank, George, Holly, Erwin, Jack, Larry, Melinda, Nick, Oscar, Paul, Quinn, Randy, Susan, Ted, Ulysses, Vanessa, Wade, Javier, Zachary, and Seth. If Eve had had all of those children by the time she was 130 years old, then when Eve had Seth in Genesis 4:25, do you think that Eve would have said that God hath appointed her another seed instead of Abel? Or do you think that Eve would have said that God had appointed her another seed instead of Zachary? You know that Seth was Eve's third child, and Jesus Christ will let you be free from young earth, no pre-Adamite witchcraft. Genesis 4:25 reveals that Seth was Eve's third child, and Genesis 5:4 reveals that Seth's oldest sister was Seth's younger sister. If you understand the Holy Bible, then you will never be tempted to claim that God commanded men to have sex with their sisters. Incidentally, if you wonder why Adam and Eve did not have their third child, Seth, until they were 130 years old, then you might want to consider the theory that they had marital problems. Maybe they were separated for many decades before conceivably reuniting in Genesis 4:25. We have no scriptural proof that Adam and Eve were ever separated. However, you should understand that Adam and Eve saw their standard of living plummet after God evicted them from the Garden of Eden in Genesis 3:23. Be aware that Cain and Abel did not experience that plummet in the standard of living. Adam and Eve did see their standard of living plummet. And after several years of the resulting stress, they may have separated, according to one theory. As far as I can tell, they may have lived rather difficult lives. And if Eve's childbirth was substantially more painful than childbirth is for our contemporary women, then it stands to reason that she would wait approximately 100 years after the birth of Abel to have another child in Genesis 4:25. Remember from Genesis 3:16 that God multiplied Eve's sorrow during childbirth. For all we know, God revealed in Genesis 3:16 that Eve suffered more childbirth pain than did pre-Adamite women. Now, think about this. If Adam and Eve and Cain were the only people on planet Earth when, in Genesis 4:14, Cain became a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, then Cain would not have worried that people would kill him. Some Christians tell us that when, in Genesis 4:16, Cain went out into the world, Cain left Adam and Eve behind, and Cain went out into a world without any people, except that incestuous sister that the false teachers have dreamed up. So, if there were not any people out in the world, then Cain would not be worried about being murdered. However, Cain was worried that people would kill him. See Genesis 4:14. Cain was aware that earth was already populated by people. Those people were the people who descended from the people whom God created in Genesis 1:27. Adam was not the first man. Incidentally, it is conceivable that Lamech killed a man who descended from a pre-Adamite. See Genesis 4:23. Some people will try to convince you that Lamech killed Cain. However, if Lamech killed Cain, then in Genesis 4:23, Lamech would have specifically said that he killed Cain. In Genesis 4:24, Lamech specifically referenced Cain. We know from Genesis 4:23 that Lamech killed a young man. Cain was not exactly a young man when Lamech spoke to his two wives in Genesis 4:23. Cain was Lamech's great-great-great-grandfather. It is evident from Genesis 4:16 through 25 that Seth was born after the first three sons of Lamech were born and after Naamah was born. See Genesis 4:22. The people who want to convince you that Lamech, the son of Methuselah, killed one of his relatives are the same people who do not believe that there were pre-Adamites. The people who claim that there were no pre-Adamites are the people who resort to damage control when they read Genesis chapter 4 and Genesis chapter 5. Simply put, it appears that the Lamech of Genesis 4:23 killed a man who descended from the people whom God created in Genesis 1:27. God bless you all.